Money does not care how hard you work. It only obeys its own laws. You already know this. You have seen it happen. A lazy man gets rich by accident. A hard worker stays poor for decades. That is not luck. That is not injustice. That is money, following rules nobody taught you. 10 laws. Learn them, and money starts moving toward you. Machiavelli never believed fortune was random. He believed fortune obeyed its own logic, and the prince who understood that logic bent it to his advantage while lesser men waited for a luck that never arrived. Money behaves almost identically today. It is not moral. It does not reward effort for its own sake. It simply moves according to a small number of consistent laws, and the people who prosper are rarely the hardest workers in the room. They are simply the ones who finally learn to read the pattern instead of continuing to push against it, year after year, waiting for effort alone to eventually be enough. Most people spend their entire life treating money as if it were fair, as if enough effort would eventually force it to arrive. Money was never fair, and it was never going to arrive simply because you worked long enough to deserve it. It moves towards specific conditions, the same conditions, over and over, in every century and every economy, regardless of who is watching and regardless of how badly the exhausted person chasing it believes they have earned a different outcome. This is not a video about budgeting or side hustles. This is a warning about a much bigger blind spot. Working furiously inside a system whose actual rules you have never once stopped to study, the way a man might row for years against a current he never bothered to notice was even there. 10 laws govern how money actually moves. Ignore them, and you can work twice as hard as everyone around you and still finish decades behind. Learn them, and effort finally starts compounding instead of evaporating into a pattern you never understood well enough to use. None of these 10 laws require special talent or a favorable starting position to apply. They require only the willingness to notice, honestly, which ones you have been quietly ignoring, and the discipline to keep applying the ones that already work, even after the novelty of noticing them has worn off. Law 1. Money moves toward confidence, not correctness. Money does not stop to verify who is right. It moves toward whoever sounds certain, acts decisively, and carries themselves as though the outcome is already settled. The cautious expert who hedges every claim loses the room to the confident amateur who doesn't, every single time the two compete for the same opportunity in front of someone who has to decide quickly. Picture 2 consultants pitching an identical solution to the same client. One qualifies every sentence, careful never to overstate what he actually knows. The other states his recommendation flatly, without a single hedge, and looks the client in the eye while doing it. The careful consultant is technically more accurate. The confident one gets hired, almost every time, because the client is not actually evaluating truth. He is evaluating certainty, and certainty is the only thing he can actually feel in a 30-minute meeting where nobody has time to verify anything deeper. The mechanism behind this is uncomfortable but simple. Nobody making a fast decision has the time or the expertise to independently verify a claim, so they substitute a proxy instead. How certain the speaker sounds. Confidence becomes a stand-in for competence in exactly the moments when competence is hardest to actually measure, which is most of the moments where real money changes hands. This is precisely why 2 people with genuinely identical qualifications so often walk away from the same room with wildly different outcomes. One hired instantly, the other told to follow up later. The room rarely has the tools to measure the actual gap in competence. It only ever has the tools to measure the gap in how each person carried themselves while presenting it. This is not an argument for dishonesty. It is a warning that hedged truth loses to confident conviction more often than it should, and pretending otherwise has cost careful, genuinely qualified people fortunes they were actually capable of earning, simply because they never learned to sound as sure as they actually were. Confidence is a currency money accepts before competence has time to prove itself, and the exchange rate rarely moves in favor of the person still waiting to feel certain enough to speak. Notice how often you already do this backwards, softening your own claims out of politeness or genuine humility at the exact moment a decision is actually being made. The correction is not learning to bluff. It is learning to state what you already know plainly, without the reflexive hedge that quietly tells the room to doubt you before anyone else has the chance to. This correction compounds visibly over a career, since every room that ever has to choose quickly between two similarly qualified people is, in effect, running this same test again. The version of you that sounds sure wins that test more often, not because it deserves to more often, but because it is simply easier for a room under time pressure to act on. Law 2. Money concentrates. It never spreads evenly. Wealth does not distribute itself across a population the way rainfall does. It pools in specific rooms, specific cities, specific families, specific circles, and it keeps pooling in the same places long after the original reason for that concentration has faded from anyone's memory. Proximity to where money already sits matters more than almost any other single factor in how quickly more of it arrives for you personally. Two equally talented workers take different jobs at the same starting salary. One works in an industry where the money is thin and evenly spread, competing for scraps with everyone around him in a market with little real capital behind it. The other works in an industry where the money is genuinely concentrated, close enough to real capital that opportunities simply appear more often at larger size, with less effort spent chasing them. 10 years later, the first worker has climbed as high as a thin pool allows, exhausted from the climb. The second has been repeatedly pulled upward by a pool that was simply deeper to begin with, requiring far less individual effort per rung. This is why the same skill, applied in two different rooms, produces wildly different fortunes over an identical span of years. The skill was never the only variable in the equation, no matter how much career advice pretends otherwise. The depth of the pool it was applied to mattered just as much, and often mattered more. Water finds the lowest point. Money finds the deepest pool, and it rewards whoever is already standing in it when the level rises. This is also why moving to where the pool is deeper, even at a lower starting title or a smaller initial paycheck, so often outperforms staying comfortable in a shallow one over the long run. The room itself is doing work. No individual effort inside a thin market can ever fully replace. This does not mean every deep pool is worth entering blindly, since some pools are deep for reasons that will not last. A bubble rather than a genuine concentration of durable capital. The distinction worth learning is between a pool deep because real value is actually flowing through it, and a pool merely deep because attention has temporarily piled in. Law 3. Money remembers reputation long after it forgets the deal that built it. Every transaction eventually fades from memory, but the reputation it built or damaged keeps working long after the specific details are gone. Money flows toward names people trust without needing to be reminded why, and it avoids names people distrust for reasons they can no longer even fully articulate, only feel. Consider two traders who each make one dishonest deal early in their career. One is caught, and the story follows him for a decade, quietly closing doors he never even knows were closed, in rooms he is never invited into. The other is caught too, but responds by overcorrecting fully, becoming almost aggressively transparent for years afterward, until the new reputation fully overwrites the old one in the minds of everyone who matters. The first trader spends a decade wondering why opportunities keep drying up for no visible reason he can name. The second trader's early mistake becomes, strangely, part of a redemption story that makes him more trusted than he would have been without it ever happening. Reputation compounds the same way capital does, silently, in the background, whether or not anyone is actively tracking it. Every interaction either makes a deposit or a withdrawal from a balance most people never think to check until it is unexpectedly overdrawn. Reputation is not just protection. It is a compounding asset that keeps paying or keeps costing long after the event that created it is forgotten by everyone except the money that remembers it perfectly. This is why a single public failure, handled badly, can cost more than the money lost in the failure itself, and why the same failure, handled with total transparency, can end up worth more to a reputation than if it had never happened at all. Law 4. Money travels faster through relationships than through applications. A formal application, a cold submission, a resume dropped into an anonymous pile moves at the speed of bureaucracy. A warm introduction moves at the speed of trust, which is almost always faster and almost always larger. Money overwhelmingly prefers to move through people who already vouch for each other rather than through a process designed to filter out strangers it has no reason to trust yet. Two equally qualified candidates pursue the same opportunity. One submits a flawless application through the official channel and waits, trusting the process to notice him fairly. The other spends the same energy building one genuine relationship with someone already inside the room. The first candidate's application is one of hundreds, evaluated coldly against a checklist by someone who has never met him. The second candidate's opportunity arrives through a conversation already pre-vouched for, competing against nobody at all. The official channel exists to process strangers safely, not to move money quickly. It was built for risk management, not for speed, and treating it as the primary path is a category error most people never notice they are making. This is not about who deserves it more. It is about which channel money actually prefers to travel through, and the official channel was never the fast one, no matter how fair it appears on paper. This is not an argument to abandon official channels entirely, only to stop treating them as the primary strategy. Spend real effort on relationships before an opportunity is even needed, so that when it finally appears, you are already inside the room, instead of still waiting outside the door marked "Apply here." Building the relationship first also changes how the eventual opportunity is offered, since a person already trusted is far more likely to be shown the real terms up front rather than the polished version reserved for strangers being evaluated at arm's length. The relationship does not just open the door faster, it changes what is actually waiting on the other side of it. Law 5. A hesitant hand is an invitation for money to move elsewhere. Money does not wait patiently for someone to feel ready. The moment it senses hesitation, it simply continues on to whoever is prepared to receive it immediately, without needing to be convinced twice. A good opportunity offered to a hesitant person rarely stays available long enough for that person to finish deliberating over it. Two investors are shown the same promising early opportunity on the same afternoon. One wants to think it over, run more numbers, sleep on it for a week before committing to anything. The other commits before leaving the room, trusting the read he already has. A week later, the first investor finishes his careful analysis and calls to say yes, only to learn the opportunity was taken days earlier by someone who decided in minutes. Careful analysis was not the mistake here. Treating hesitation as free, as though the opportunity would simply wait patiently for him, was. Every opportunity has a shelf life that has nothing to do with how long the analysis takes to complete. Money does not know or care how thorough your reasoning was. It only knows whether you were still standing there when it arrived. Money moves at the speed of decision. Anyone slower than that speed is not being careful. They are simply watching it move to someone else who was ready. This is why the disciplined and the reckless are so often confused for each other from the outside looking in. What looks like recklessness is frequently just a faster, already completed version of the same analysis the hesitant person is still running, arrived at through pattern recognition instead of paralysis. Law 6. Money rewards visibility, not merit alone. Excellent work that nobody sees might as well not exist to the flow of money, which cannot reward what it cannot perceive in the first place. Merit is a precondition, not a guarantee, and confusing the two leaves genuinely skilled people wondering why recognition never seems to arrive on the schedule they feel they have earned. Two craftsmen produce work of identical quality for years. One works entirely in private, assuming quality alone will eventually be noticed and rewarded without him needing to do anything else. The other deliberately makes his work visible, showing it, discussing it, placing it in front of the people who could actually pay for more of it. The private craftsman's excellent work quietly accumulates in a room nobody enters. The visible craftsman's merely good work, seen consistently by the right people, ends up funding a career the first craftsman never gets the chance to have. Visibility is not vanity here, whatever the private craftsman tells himself to justify staying hidden. It is the transmission mechanism merit requires to actually reach the money that would otherwise never learn it exists, no matter how good the work quietly sitting in the dark actually is. This does not mean manufacturing attention for its own sake, which people can usually smell immediately and distrust on instinct. It means treating the sharing of real work as part of the work itself, not as an embarrassing afterthought to be avoided by anyone who takes their own craft seriously. The discomfort here is rarely about the effort of sharing itself, which is usually minor. It is about the exposure that comes with being seen and, occasionally, being seen failing, a risk the permanently private craftsman never has to face precisely because he never lets the work be seen at all. Law 7. Money multiplies in systems and crawls in single transactions. A single sale produces a single result, once, and then it is finished, requiring the same full effort again the next time. A system, once built, produces the same result repeatedly without requiring that same effort each cycle. Money that flows through a system compounds. Money that flows through a single transaction simply arrives once and stops there. Two sellers close an identical number of deals in their first year. One treats every sale as its own isolated event, starting from zero effort each time a new customer is needed from scratch. The other spends part of that same year building a system, referrals, repeat customers, a process that generates new deals with less direct effort each cycle it runs. A few years later, the first seller is still working exactly as hard per dollar earned as he did on day one, trapped on the same treadmill. The second seller's system produces more dollars per hour of his own direct effort every single year that passes. The transaction feeds you today, and only today. The system feeds you for years without needing to be rebuilt from scratch every single time hunger returns. This is the actual argument for building anything at all instead of simply working harder at what already exists. Effort spent on a system is effort spent once that keeps paying, while effort spent on a transaction is effort spent every single time with nothing left over afterward. Law 8. Money is loyal to structure, never to the person who built it. A business, a fund, a process, once properly structured, keeps producing whether or not its original builder remains personally involved in its daily operation. Money does not care who built the structure. It only cares whether the structure still functions, which means the builder's real job was never to stay indispensable. It was to eventually become optional to the thing he built. Two founders build equally successful businesses over the same number of years. One remains the single point of failure for every important decision, indispensable by design, unable to ever fully step back without everything slowing down. The other deliberately builds structure, systems, and people capable of running the business without his constant presence being required. The first founder has built himself a demanding, well-paid job disguised convincingly as ownership. The second founder has built an actual asset that money continues flowing toward regardless of where he personally happens to be standing on any given day. Structure outlives founders, the same way a well-built kingdom outlives the prince who first assembled it. Money was always loyal to the structure, never to the person who happened to build it, however uncomfortable that fact is for the builder to accept. This is uncomfortable to hear for anyone who has built their entire identity around being needed by the thing they created. But indispensability, however flattering it feels in the moment, is simply an unfinished structure wearing the costume of security. Testing this honestly requires an uncomfortable exercise, imagining a full month away, unreachable, and asking plainly whether the structure would still be standing, still producing, by the time that month ended. Most builders already know the honest answer before finishing the question. Law 9. Money punishes the chase and rewards the builder. Chasing money directly, jumping between whatever looks profitable this month, produces a frantic, exhausting relationship with wealth that rarely compounds into anything durable. Building something valuable and letting money arrive as a byproduct produces the opposite outcome entirely, a slower start, but a far larger and far more stable result over time. Two ambitious people start the same year with the same resources. One chases every new opportunity that promises fast money, switching direction every time something more lucrative appears to exist somewhere else. The other builds one thing patiently, for years, largely ignoring shinier opportunities along the way, regardless of how tempting they look. The chaser has, after a decade, an exhausting history of near misses and very little to actually show for any single one of them. The builder has one thing that is now worth far more than any of the individual opportunities the chaser jumped toward and eventually abandoned. Chasing money treats it as prey that must be actively caught before it escapes. Building treats it as a byproduct that arrives on its own timeline, and only one of those two relationships actually compounds into something lasting. This is why the builder often looks, for years, like he is falling behind the chaser, who appears busier, more active, more visibly engaged with opportunity after opportunity. The comparison only reverses once enough time has passed for compounding to actually show its work. Anyone attempting this needs the patience to tolerate looking for a real stretch of years, like the less impressive choice was made. That stretch is not a sign the choice was wrong. It is simply the part of compounding that happens before it becomes visible to anyone watching from the outside. Law 10. Money always finds the door left open. Every rejection, every failed pitch, every closed opportunity is not actually the end of the story. Money is capable of writing for you. It simply roots around a closed door and continues toward whichever door was left open somewhere else, sometimes one nobody involved was even watching closely. Persistence is not stubbornness here. It is simply staying in the game long enough for the open door to actually be found by the person still looking for it. Two entrepreneurs are rejected by the same 20 investors in the same year, pitching the same underlying idea. One concludes the idea itself was flawed and quietly abandons it, taking the rejections as a verdict on the idea's worth. The other concludes only that those 20 specific doors were closed and keeps searching for the 21st one still standing open. The one who quit will never know whether door 21 would have said yes to the exact same pitch. The one who kept searching eventually finds it, not because he was more talented than the other 19 rejections suggested, but because he simply stayed in motion long enough for an open door to actually appear in front of him. Money is patient in a way people rarely are with themselves. It will wait for the door that opens, as long as someone is still standing there, still looking when it finally does. This is the quiet argument against quitting after any single closed door, no matter how final that door's answer felt in the moment it closed. The rejection was never a verdict on the idea itself. It was only ever a verdict on that one specific door. This is easiest to forget in the exact moment a door closes, when the rejection feels total and personal rather than local and specific. Money's patience is available precisely because it does not experience that same emotional weight. The door count that matters is never the ones that closed. It is only ever the ones still left to try. 10 laws, and every single one of them was hiding in plain sight the entire time. None of them are about working harder in the way most people already understand that phrase, the way that simply means enduring more hours at the same task. They are about finally seeing the actual shape of the thing you have been chasing blindly your entire life, often in the wrong direction, at the wrong speed, through the wrong door. Go back through this list honestly. Not the laws that sound clever in a video, the ones your own recent decisions are already quietly violating, right now, this month, with money you are actually trying to earn. That honest audit is worth more than another year of effort aimed in the wrong direction by someone who never stopped to check. Most people will read through all 10 laws and recognize themselves in 3 or 4 without ever going back to actually apply the correction. Recognizing a pattern and interrupting it are two entirely different skills, and only the second one changes anything. If this changed the way you see money itself, then don't stop here, because what you've heard in this video is only the surface. There are deeper layers to psychology, influence, and wealth that simply can't be explored fully in one video. Not because they don't exist, but because most people aren't ready to hear them. That's why most stay average. If you're not one of them, then subscribe, because every video here is designed to sharpen your mindset, increase your value, and separate you from the crowd. No fluff, no noise, just strategy. Most people will watch this and move on. A few will stay and change. Decide, right now, which one you actually are.